There is something the person who hurt you is feeling right now that they would rather die than admit out loud. Something that crawls underneath their skin in the quiet hours. Something that visits them when the lights are off and the performance is over and there is no one left to impress. You were told they did not care. You were told they moved on effortlessly. You were told they never thought about you again. And for a long time, you believed it because that is exactly what they wanted you to believe. But what you are about to understand will rearrange everything you thought you knew about the silence that followed your pain. Because behind that mask of indifference is a storm so loud, so consuming, so humiliating to them that they have built an entire identity around hiding it from you, from the world, and most importantly, from themselves. Before we go any deeper into the hidden emotional world of the narcissist, I need you to do one small thing that will change the way you receive every truth I am about to share. Subscribe to this channel, not because it helps me, but because what you are about to learn is the kind of knowledge that rewires the way you see every toxic relationship you have ever survived. The kind of insight that closes wounds you have been trying to heal for years. If you have ever been gaslit, discarded, manipulated, or made to feel like you were the problem, this channel will become the voice in your head that finally tells you the truth. Subscribe now because what comes next is not just information, it is liberation. The first thing you need to understand is that the narcissist does feel something after hurting you, just not what you hoped they felt. They do not feel guilt the way a healthy human being feels guilt. They do not feel remorse the way someone with a conscience feels remorse. What they feel is something far more uncomfortable for them, far more destabilizing, and far more revealing of who they actually are underneath the performance. They feel exposure. They feel the unbearable possibility that someone, somewhere, finally saw through them. And for a personality built entirely on illusion, being seen clearly is the closest thing to death they can experience while still breathing. Shame is the silent architect of everything the narcissist does. Not the healthy shame that helps a person reflect and grow, but a toxic, suffocating, identity-level shame that they have been running from since long before you ever met them. When they hurt you, that shame does not disappear. It multiplies. Every cruel word they spoke, every betrayal they committed, every moment they watched you break and felt nothing on the surface, all of it gets buried in a place inside them they refuse to visit. And because they cannot face it, they must turn it into something else. They turn it into blame. They turn it into rage. They turn it into a rewritten version of the story where you become the villain and they become the misunderstood hero, not because they believe it, but because they cannot survive the truth of what they actually did. You have to understand how fragile their self-worth truly is. From the outside, they appear confident, charming, magnetic, untouchable. But that confidence is a costume stitched together from the reactions of other people. Their sense of self is not built from within. It is borrowed, rented, extracted from the admiration, fear, attention, and emotional energy of others. When they hurt you, they were not acting from strength. They were acting from a desperate, panicked need to restore a sense of power they never actually possessed. And the moment you stopped reacting, the moment you stopped supplying them with that emotional fuel, something inside them began to collapse in a way they will spend the rest of their lives trying to hide. The fear of being exposed is one of the most defining emotions in the inner world of a narcissist. They live with a constant low-grade terror that someone will finally connect the dots, finally compare notes, finally speak the truth out loud in a room they cannot control. After they hurt you, this fear sharpens because you now hold a piece of their truth. You know what they look like when the mask slips. You have seen the cruelty, the coldness, the contradictions. And no matter how confidently they walk through the world afterward, a part of them is always watching, always wondering, always calculating what you might say, who you might tell, and how much of their carefully constructed image you have the power to dismantle. This is why control becomes an obsession, not love, not connection, control. They need to control the narrative. They need to control how you remember them. They need to control how others perceive the ending of what you shared. If they cannot control you directly, they will try to control the story about you. They will rewrite history with a calm voice and a wounded expression. They will plant subtle doubts in the minds of mutual friends. They will pose as the one who tried, the one who gave everything, the one who was abandoned by someone unstable. And every time they tell that story, a small part of them knows it is a lie. But the lie is easier than the truth, and the narcissist always chooses the easier emotional path. Genuine accountability requires something the narcissist structurally does not possess, which is the ability to sit with their own wrongdoing without immediately defending, deflecting, or destroying. Accountability requires a stable sense of self that can absorb the words, "I hurt someone," and still remain intact. The narcissist does not have that stability. For them, admitting fault is not a moral act. It is an existential threat. To admit they hurt you would be to admit they are not who they have told themselves they are. And that single admission would crack the entire foundation of their identity. So instead of accountability, they offer performance. Hollow apologies, strategic tears, carefully timed gestures designed to manage your perception rather than repair the damage. And you, with your real heart and your real hope, kept mistaking the performance for change. There's a critical difference between regret and remorse, and once you understand it, you will never confuse the two again. Regret is when someone is sorry about the consequences they are facing. Remorse is when someone is sorry about the pain they caused. The narcissist is fluent in regret. They regret losing access to you. They regret losing their image. They regret losing the convenience, the comfort, the supply, the control. But they do not feel remorse for what they did to your nervous system, your self-esteem, your sense of safety in the world. If the consequences disappeared tomorrow, so would their apology. And deep down, you have always known this. You felt it every time their words said one thing and your body said another. This is why they monitor you long after the relationship is over. They watch your social media from accounts you do not know exist. They ask mutual acquaintances casual questions designed to extract information. They drive past places you used to go together. They track your milestones, your glow-ups, your new relationships, your healing. Not because they miss you, because they need to know whether they still exist in your inner world. Your attention, even negative attention, was a mirror that reflected them back to themselves. Without that mirror, they begin to disappear, and the narcissist cannot tolerate the experience of disappearing. So, they watch, silently, obsessively, pretending they are not watching at all. And here is the part almost no one talks about. They become genuinely angry when you heal, not disappointed, not concerned, angry. Because your healing is the final piece of evidence they cannot argue with. As long as you were broken, they could tell themselves the story that you were always broken, that the damage was not their doing, that you were unstable from the beginning. But the moment you rise, the moment you become calmer, stronger, more grounded, more radiant than you ever were inside the relationship, that story collapses. Your healing exposes them in a way no confrontation ever could. Your peace becomes a verdict, and they feel it, even from a distance. I want to pause here because I know what you are feeling right now. You are feeling that strange mix of validation and grief that comes when someone finally puts language to what you lived through. If this is reaching you, if any part of this is landing in the places you have been guarding for years, do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Share this with someone you love who is still trapped in the fog, still blaming themselves, still wondering if they were the problem. Because the more people who understand these patterns, the fewer people the narcissist gets to harm. Your awareness is not just personal. It is protective for you, for the people you love, and for the next person who will not have to suffer in confusion the way you did. Now, there is a particular fear that haunts the narcissist more than almost any other, and that is the fear of being forgotten, being hated, being feared, being resented. All of these they can metabolize. Hatred is still attention, fear is still power, resentment is still a connection. But being forgotten, being treated as if they never mattered at all, being moved past with the same indifference they once showed you, that is the emotional equivalent of annihilation for them. They would rather be the villain in your story than be absent from it. They would rather you scream their name than never say it again. And the day you stop mentioning them, the day they realize they are no longer the main character in your inner life, something inside them quietly begins to die. Underneath everything they project, the narcissist is emotionally empty in a way that is difficult for emotionally healthy people to even imagine. They do not experience the full range of human feeling. They experience fragments of it, edited versions of it, surface-level imitations of it. They have learned what emotions look like by observing others, and they perform those emotions with skill. But on the inside, there is a hollowness, a flatness, a static silence that they spend their entire lives trying to fill. They fill it with new partners. They fill it with attention. They fill it with admiration, conflict, drama, sex, status, validation. But the emptiness always returns, because the emptiness is not a problem to be solved with external supply. It is the consequence of a self that was never fully built. And after they hurt you, that emptiness becomes louder because losing you meant losing one of the most reliable sources they had for drowning it out. This is why they need constant validation, not occasional, not situational, constant. Their psychological survival depends on a steady stream of external input, telling them they are special, desirable, important, superior. The moment that stream slows, they begin to feel something close to panic, though they would never call it that. They will call it boredom, they will call it restlessness, they will call it the other person being too much or not enough. But what is actually happening is that their internal world cannot sustain itself without external feeding. And when they hurt you and you finally walked away or were discarded or were forced into silence, they did not lose a partner. They lost a power source. And every narcissist knows, somewhere underneath the denial, that losing a power source means facing themselves. And facing themselves is the one thing they have been avoiding their entire life. The psychological consequences of losing supply are far more severe than most people realize. There is a phase that many of them go through, sometimes called narcissistic collapse, where the carefully maintained image begins to crack under the weight of accumulated losses. They become more reactive, more paranoid, more desperate in their attempts to secure new sources of admiration. They may spiral into impulsive decisions, sudden new relationships, public displays of happiness designed entirely for the audience they suspect is still watching. And underneath all of it is a person who is not actually happy, not actually healed, not actually moving on, but is performing all three with increasing intensity, because the alternative is to feel what they have been running from for decades. You need to understand that the emotions they suppress are not small. They are not minor inconveniences. They are tidal waves they have spent a lifetime building walls against. Loneliness so profound it would terrify them to name it. Self-loathing so deep it would shatter the persona they have constructed. Envy of people who can feel love without calculating it. Grief for a self they never got to develop. Fear of intimacy. Fear of dependence. Fear of the very vulnerability they punished in you. And every time these emotions begin to rise, they immediately convert them into something more manageable like anger, contempt, superiority, or indifference. You were not the only one being manipulated in that relationship. They were manipulating themselves every single day. What truly bothers them after hurting you is not your pain. It is the loss of their control over your perception of them. They are not lying awake thinking about how you cried. They are lying awake wondering if you finally see them clearly. They are wondering if you are telling people the truth. They are wondering if your new calm means you have figured out something they spent the entire relationship trying to keep you from figuring out. They are wondering if your indifference is real or performed. They are wondering if you are happy without them. And worse, if your happiness is somehow proof that you were always the strong one, and they were always the fragile one, wearing a costume of strength. And they can never openly admit any of this because admitting it would require them to dismantle the only self they know how to be. To admit shame would be to admit they did something shameful. To admit fear would be to admit they are not powerful. To admit emptiness would be to admit they are not whole. To admit they think about you would be to admit you mattered. And to admit you mattered would be to admit that losing you was a real loss, not a minor inconvenience. So instead, they will smile in photos. They will post about how blessed they are. They will speak about you in dismissive tones. They will tell anyone who will listen that they are doing wonderfully. And the louder they perform their okayness, the more clearly you should hear the truth underneath it. This is the moment I want you to take with you because everything I have told you points to a single life-changing realization. The person who hurt you was never operating from strength. They were operating from a wound so deep they could not look at it, so they made you carry it instead. Their cruelty was not power. It was the panic of a fragile self trying to feel real. Their silence was not closure. It was a performance for an audience they hoped was still watching. Their indifference was not healing. It was a costume covering an internal world that has never known peace. And you, the one who actually feels, who actually grieves, who actually grows, who is actually doing the difficult and sacred work of healing, you are the one with the real power. You always were. They knew it. That is why they tried so hard to convince you otherwise. If this video has reached something real inside you, if it has named something you have carried in silence for too long, I want you to do 3 things before you go. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next truth that helps you reclaim yourself. Like this video so it reaches someone else who is sitting in the same confusion you were once sitting in. And leave a comment. Even just a single word, because your voice in that comment section becomes part of a community of people who are walking out of the fog together. You are not alone in what you live through, and you are not alone in what you are becoming. So let this be the moment something shifts. Let this be the day you stop waiting for an apology that was never going to come from a person who was never capable of giving it. Let this be the day you stop interpreting their silence as mystery and start recognizing it as confession. Let this be the day you understand that their secret emotional world is not a treasure to be uncovered, but a prison they built for themselves, and your freedom is not contingent on them ever stepping out of it. You do not need their admission. You do not need their closure. You do not need their version of the truth. You live the truth. Your body remembers it. Your nervous system remembers it. And now your mind has the language to match what you always knew. Walk forward. Do not look back. They are still performing for an audience that is no longer watching, and you have far more important things to become.